Good morning. Hey, Wayne. How you doing, sir? Glad you can make it. I'm going to give it just another minute. I know that several people said that they are busy this morning, so they're not going to be able to catch the class, but they can watch it later. This is our official last class on Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a sad, sad day because this is an amazing book, but we're going to be finishing it off and moving on next week to our new book, which is Fast Facts for False Teachings. It's just a very simple introduction to the teachings of other religions. We're going to be comparing and contrasting them to our own religion, and be very careful to be respectful of those different folks. These guys they tend to judge the religions based upon Christianity. We're going to try not to do that. We're just going to compare and contrast them, and it'll be good. It'll be good. Just introduction to our own faith. So I'm going to be on page 223. Also, too, if you guys are buying this, I sent out a link on this book yesterday on Amazon, and the book itself has a whole different cover. I mean, this cover screams, 1993. So they have a new cover. Good for them. It's wise. So here we are. So we're going to be looking at 223. We're in the last section, chapter 5, and it's called Let the Other Person Save Face. And this one's really important when it comes to arguments with family, friends, children, spouses, bosses as well, because everybody wants to save face, especially if a person has come to the point where they've realized that they're wrong. Some people will just straight up double down on their decision to argue or fight or hold some opinion just by virtue of the fact they don't want to admit they're wrong. By letting a person save face, you give them the opportunity to safely and graciously bow out without having to admit fault. So here he gives a great example, starts off, he says, years ago, the General Electric Company was faced with a delicate task of removing Charles. He was a genius of the first magnitude when it came to electricity, but he failed as a calculating department head. The company didn't want to offend him because he was very important to the company. He was great at what he does, just wasn't a good leader. And he was highly sensitive, it says. So they gave him a new title, the Consulting Engineer of General Electric Company. The new title for work he was already doing, and they let somebody else lead the department. And this was a great way for them to, again, not throw this guy under the bus and not offend him. They gave him a new title and allowed him to do what he's good at, which is to play to his strengths. And the guy was happy. We let him save face. Says Carnegie says, we ride roughshod over the feelings of others all the time. When they get in our way, we're finding fault, we're issuing threats, we're criticizing our children, our employees, and we're doing this in front of others. And that's the worst part about it. He says we're without even considering how much we're hurting the other person's pride. Now, remember, this is not a negative pride in the sense of something that's a sin. This is just a person's pride in who they are. We're not to ridicule somebody and make them feel bad about who they are as a human being. And we got to make sure we know the difference between pride and hubris. The Bible uses the word pride, but in reality, a better word would be hubris oftentimes when it comes to the idea of sin and pride. Fast forward a couple of pages. Excuse me. And he says, basically let people save face. He gives some anecdotes on page 226. He's talking about a guy who is dealing with this situation. He says, this person assured me in front of all my colleagues that he had faith in me. And he knew I had done my best and that my lack of experience, not my lack of ability, was the reason for my failure. This was a young woman who was starting out as in her new job, and she had failed. She had made a mistake. And rather than the boss yelling and screaming and embarrassing her in front of the crowd, remember, this is a long, long time ago. A woman being in charge at this time would have been crazy. It even says that she was deathly afraid of not handling it correctly and having all the men say, well, see, women shouldn't be in positions of authority. But so she sucked it up. She admitted she was wrong, and her boss was super gracious and told everybody that, hey, you know what? When you don't have the experience, you fail sometimes. But that has nothing to do with your character. It has nothing to do with who you are as a person. He says it's not a lack of ability. And she says, I left that meeting with my head held up high in the air and with the determination that I would never let that boss down again. And that's the goal. We want people to want to be better for their own sake. This guy, I don't know who it is, said this, very famous, I guess. He says, I have no right to say or do anything that diminishes a man in his own eyes. What matters is not what I think of him, but what he thinks of himself. Hurting a man in his dignity is a crime. So that fifth principle that we're learning today is let other person save face. My personal experiences have to do with fights, like literal physical fights. I've been in lots of fights, and I've had situations where even in Iowa City here, where people have gotten huffy and just being very awful to other people. So I kind of step in and say, come on, calm down. This poor cashier has nothing to do with whatever is going on. And then they want to have some fisticuffs. But what I found is that when you confront somebody on their anger, and then you point it out to them that their anger is they're just aiming their anger at the wrong person. The cashier or the person at the bank teller or whatever has nothing to do with why you're angry. So why are you being rude to that person? They know they're wrong. When they're confronted with it, they know they're wrong. And now not only have they been confronting somebody publicly, now they're embarrassed because some stranger has decided to confront them. And what happens is that I try very hard to allow the person to save face, to be able to bow out well, and to be able to just walk away. I don't taunt them. I don't call them as they walk away. Yeah, you better walk away. Don't do any of that. As long as you give the person an opportunity to leave, maybe you should just go, yeah, whatever, blah, 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 F you or whatever. And then they kind of they stomp off. Well, I've just given them an out, and then they walk away cussing and swearing and yelling, but it ends the conflict. And I'm not there to boost my ego. So why would I yell and cuss and whatever at the person as they walk away? My hope was to just kind of knock the situation down and protect the innocent person who can't defend themselves. But I've had that happen a lot of times. And if you allow the person to save face and you allow them to walk away with their head held up high, you're like, hey man, I don't know what happened, but come on, you're being inappropriate. Why don't we just go outside and talk about it? And I've done that a lot, and it works most of the time. 99% of the time. There's 1% of the time where somebody just needs to have it go a little further. 227, how to spur people on to success. Pete Barlow was an old friend of mine. He says he had a dog and a pony act, a dog and pony show, and he went around with the circus. He would train his dogs, and the point is that Pete would, every time the dog would make some progress, he'd give every time the dog would make progress, Pete would give the dog a treat, some meat or something, and say, hey, you're a good boy. And the dog would be like, yes, I'm so awesome. And he was just saying, why don't we just do that for people? Why are we not training people with treats and helping them feel good about themselves? It's funny is that if you beat a dog, it will not actually obey you in the same way as if you treat it with respect and love and grace and mercy and snuggle it and pet it. It wants to make you happy. But if you beat it and hurt it, it won't be the same. It will not try harder for you. And that's an animal. The same thing goes for people. He says, let us praise even the slightest improvement. that inspires the other person to keep on improving. I read this when I had children, when they were tiny, tiny, tiny. And my wife and I have had many conversations about this topic and just trying very hard to make sure that our kids hear more praise than criticism. And it's very hard because you end up seeing all the bad things, but you never acknowledge all the good things. And when my wife and I are in different moods, one or the other have to remind each other of this. Like the kids don't do their dishes, and I have to remind my wife, like, babe, our kids don't do drugs. They're not sneaking off in the middle of the night. They're not doing all the stupid stuff that some of their peers are doing. They're not doing the dishes is not the end of the world. So let's not pretend like it is the end of the world. Is it frustrating? Sure. But come on now. And it's just a good reminder. And so we try very hard to compliment, and sincerely compliment them. Both my daughters just 2 days ago PR'd, I mean, they got their own personal records in the sports they play. They do shot put and discus. And I mean, it was just nothing but praises. And they would just, then it makes them try harder. And Nina PR'd 4 times in the same event. She actually, every time she threw, she got better and better and better in a row. It was crazy. He says here, Jess Lair, a psychologist, he says, praise is like sunlight to a warm human spirit. We cannot flower and grow without it. And yet, while many of us are only too ready to apply to others the cold wind of criticism, we are somehow reluctant to give our fellow the warm sunshine of praise. Very important that we just praise people. And he gives some examples. We've had examples in the past, but here are some examples. Young 10-year-old boy working in a factory in Naples. And said he longed to be a singer. Teacher told him that he was never going to make it. Mom says, don't listen to her. They were barefoot, living in a dirt floor hut. The boy is working in a factory. Mom scrimped and saved money to give the kids some music lessons. And all said and done, he became Enrico Caruso. If you don't know the name, very famous opera singer, came from nothing, but it was because of his mom that he was able to rise to the occasion. Another young man from London, never attended school. His father was in jail, was starving at times. He says he was writing letters and writing papers and trying to get published in just anything, a newspaper or something. Finally, he said he was so embarrassed that he would actually send out his things at nighttime because he didn't want the other boys to know he was trying to do something. Finally, there was a great day. Something he had written was accepted. He wasn't paid for it. It was just accepted and printed on behalf of the printer, but he didn't make any money on it. But the editor praised him. And that one editor gave him recognition. Remember, we talked about recognition a couple weeks ago. That person became Charles Dickens, one of the greatest writers of the last century. And if you don't know who Charles Dickens is, your education system has failed you. Another boy, London as well. He was working 14 hours a day, young man. He wrote a long letter to his schoolmaster, his teacher, just so depressed about what was going on and how he just wanted to do so much more. The teacher wrote him back and said, hey man, you're intelligent. You are destined for great things. Don't just because you're working a job you don't like right now, don't give up. He encouraged him. This schoolmaster encouraged him. And pretty soon he just really applied himself, got his degree in English literature, went on to be one of the greatest people of writers of our time, H.G. Wells. And if I remember, H.G. Wells was the person, I think H.G. Wells wrote War of the Worlds. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that's accurate. War of the Worlds, which went on to be probably the greatest radio program of all time, where in the United States, it was so good that people actually thought the United States was being invaded by aliens. Again, great story. I have the actual in my office here. I'm not going to show you right now. I have an original copy of the record of the War of the Worlds. I like it because it reminds me of the power of persuasion and how easily we can be misled. And anyway, I got it from my grandma a long time ago. It's probably twice as old as I am, but it's a great reminder. But it was written by H.G. Wells, I'm pretty sure. And then B.F. Skinner, very famous psychologist, was talking about these experiments he did with animals and humans. And the point is that always positive reinforcement is always better. When criticism is minimized and praise emphasized, the good things people do will be reinforced and the poorer things will atrophy for lack of attention. A lot of kids will act out because it's the only way they can get attention from their parents, especially nowadays when mom and dad are sitting there on their phones every day, every minute, and the kids come home and they're on their phones all day. And then now their kids are in the house, they're all home, and now mom is on Facebook and dad is playing a video game. Kids will oftentimes unintentionally, but they will unconsciously act out just to get some attention, just to have mom and dad just notice that they exist. If you encourage them and don't criticize and give them all the love and attention they need, they're less likely to act out. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory, but backed up by psychology. So I love this. He says, they began capitalizing on the praise that we were giving them. That idea of capitalizing on the praise. It's important for us to remember that criticism is, think about criticism as a thing. It's an object that you can actually put on somebody and it weighs them down, where praise is like a currency. You give praise and it's like a currency. And then that person can take that currency, that praise, and then they can take it and invest it in themselves. And then they will actually capitalize on it in the sense of capitalism. They'll take it, build upon it, and get better and better and better. And they'll build and build and build. And praise has the tendency to allow a person to capitalize and grow and invest in themselves. Where criticism drives a person into the ground and it makes them sad, and it completely deflates any opportunity they have to grow or mature. So basically, admiration, love, and compliments are always better. 231. Mr. Roper did what Mr. Roper did was not just flatter the young printer and say, "You're good." He specifically pointed out how his work was superior. Because he had singled out a specific accomplishment rather than just making general flattering remarks, his praise became much more meaningful to the person to whom it was given. Everybody likes to be praised, but when praise is specific, it comes across as sincere, not something that other person may be saying just to make you feel good. Sincere praise is important because it means that you are actually thinking about the person. When you are praising somebody sincerely, you are being specific. And if you could say, "Well, I'm not really great at compliments, and I'm not really, I'm just naturally just not really great at being friendly or whatever." If you are making an effort to be specific about your praise, I would say you're wrong. If you have the intention to make people feel good and encourage them, and you are being very specific about your encouragement, you are taking the extra steps to learn about that person, to make them feel special, and to remind them of how important they are. And if you are taking those extra steps, I would say you are becoming a great person because you want to know them better and to make them happy. And that's a great quality to have, but being specific helps. Every man who is married to a woman will know very quickly that when your wife says, "Hey, how do I look?" She wants more than good. She wants you to tell her that her hair or her necklace or her makeup or her dress or her shoes or whatever it is she's wearing. And you better remember you better notice if there's anything different. It takes practice though. And guys like that too. If my wife gives me a compliment, it's nice to be like, oh yeah, you're a pretty smart guy. And it's like, okay, but what though? Like what is it about me that you know, that you think is great? And we all like that. Nobody wants flattery. The principles taught in this book will work only when they come from the heart. I'm not advocating a bag of tricks. He says, I'm talking about a new way of life. And that's the point. As Christians, we should be applying these principles because we want people to know the love of God. God made every single person as an individual special, gave them spiritual gifts, gave them the ability to grow the kingdom of God. Those gifts are just hidden under the surface. And we are here to encourage people to love them, to show them the love of Christ, and to point out how God has blessed them. And then as we tell them how great they are and tell them and try to focus on their gifts, and somebody says, if we're different than other people in that way, and they ask why, we can introduce them to Christ and say, hey, the reason why I believe you have all this potential is because God gave it to you. You were born with it. You are special. You have gifts that I can't have because you are so gifted in certain ways, and God made you that way. It is a part of who you are in your essence. No one can even take it from you. That's how essential to your being it is. And then we can point people to Jesus. Praise God. And that's the goal, is to try to spread the love of God. Principle number 6, he says, praise the slightest improvement and praise every improvement. Be hearty in your approbation and lavish in your praise. So great points for us to remember. Now, this one here, this next chapter, if there's whole lots of good things in this book, this is top 5. It says, give a dog a good name. But what the chapter is actually about is, and you can write this in there if it makes it easier for you, give a person a reputation to live up to. He says, what do you do when a person who has been a good worker begins to turn in shoddy work? So he talks about this mechanic, and the guy says, Bill, you're a fine mechanic. You've been in the line of work for years. You do a great job. You've got tons of compliments. I hear them all the time. He says, yet of late, he says, you've taken more time to complete jobs, and, you haven't been doing your best work. And I know you can do better because I've seen you do it. You have a standard that's like here, but as of late, you haven't even been reaching your own standard. And what he's doing is he's saying, hey, man, you are here and you're performing here, but this is where you naturally are. What do I need to do to help you? Because something you need help. And I'm trying, I love you. I want to help you get to back where you should be. And then that person, that's a reputation to reach for. And then the person struggles and strives to try to get to that point. Is with a reputation that you want to give them a reputation to live up to. Says the average person, says this guy at Locomotive Works, can be led readily if you have his or her respect, and if you show that you respect that person for some kind of ability, some God-given gift, and you want to try to find out what their gifts are. As parents, we should be looking very hard to try to discern what our kids' gifts are, spiritual gifts. Same thing with. If you want to improve a person in a certain respect, act as though that particular trait were already one of his or her outstanding characteristics. Shakespeare said, assume a virtue if you have it not. And now this is a situation where we know for a fact, for example, that our child can walk. Like they're at the intellectual age and maturity, they can walk. And then you encourage the kid and you say, you can do it. You can do it. We do that all the time. You can do it. I know you can. You can do it. And we praise them and tell them how great they are and tell them how much they can do. And we know you can. You can. I have faith in you. When you tell somebody you have faith in them and you know that they can, you're giving them a reputation to reach. You're helping the person to realize that they have more potential that they have to realize. Awesome. They want to reach that potential. And because you're so encouraging and you're walking that path with them, it's just another example of us following along and trying to, be the Holy Spirit for other people. It's great, and encouraging them to grow. says here, I'm going to skip this story here. It's a long one. It says a small praise had changed her life. This woman's name is Marie. She was just a scullery maid. Basically, she's a maid of some sort. And this person says to her, Georgette says something along the lines of, Marie, you do not know what treasures are within you. And just that one compliment from a superior in the sense of authority just helped that girl to build herself up. Anyway, by the time the story's done, she went from a dishwasher to a lady when she got married to this I think the chef's son or something. Point is, she was very happy afterward, and she got that encouragement. Daytona Beach, Florida. Bill brooded all day over his rejection, and he decided to return to the store. So he's a salesman. He's trying to sell something. The sale didn't go through. And this is the letter or a phone call he sent. He says, hey man, I want to come back, blah, 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 blah. He says, I have respected the fact that you are always willing to listen and are big enough to change your mind when the facts warrant the change. That's a reputation to live up to. When you're talking to somebody and you can say to your boss or your subordinate or your employee or your child or your spouse or whatever, and be like, you are a fantastic person. That's not specific enough, but you can say that. You're a fantastic person, and you just really try hard to be patient. That's a reputation to reach. Then you can say, and I know that you're going to try very hard for your kids or something. Say, I know you are a very hard worker, and when you put your mind to something, nothing changes it. And your little brother keeps going in your room and wrecking your stuff or what, I don't know, whatever. But I want you and I to work together. I want you and me to work together to try to figure out a way for us to explain it to your little brother so we could all work together, because I know you love your brother. You'd protect him. I mean, if somebody tried to take him, you'd fight tooth and nail, wouldn't you? Oh yeah, absolutely. See, I know you would. So you love him very much. So how can we teach him? Because we love him, how can we teach him to be a good boy? How can we work together with him? Because you are such a good sister or brother. You are so patient. You are these things. That's a reputation to reach for. And I'm telling you, works wonders. And it's not a lie. Especially with our children. I know with Nina is very strong-willed, and she just very much wants to be strong and tough, and she prides herself in being able to deal with hard things. So when we've wanted to, like, the kids have to mow the lawn or something, and she's like, I don't know if I want to. I'm like, babe, if it's too hard for you, don't worry about it. And she's like, what? And I was like, babe, you've worked all day, and I could understand why you're too tired to do that job. You need to take a break because you're so tired. And you know what? It's not for everybody. Sometimes it's just too hard for some people. And if it's too hard for you, it's fine. She knows I'm joking with her, and she knows I'm poking her. But the point is, she gets up and she goes, pulls a lawnmower over, and she starts mowing because she doesn't want to be weak. She wants to be strong. But we've been building our kids up with that idea of how strong and intelligent and smart and great they are. We have here an example. Dentist. Somebody mentions how some of his utensils are dirty, so he writes a letter. This is just excellent. He writes a letter, and he's willing to help. This, you got to read the heart here. Carnegie doesn't deal with the heart of this as much as I'd like, but he actually is willing. These people are willing to walk with the person and help them. So in this instance, the guy writes a letter and says, I see you seldom. This is the cleaner. So I thought I'd take a time to thank you for the fine job of cleaning you've been doing. By the way, I thought I'd mention that since 2 hours twice a week is very limited time, please feel free to work an extra half hour more from time to time if you feel you need to do those once in a while jobs like polishing the cup holders and the like. I, of course, will pay you for the extra time. So here he didn't just say, make sure you clean the pots, make sure you clean the utensils. He didn't say that. He said, you know what? I recognize you're a good worker. I recognize you work hard. He didn't even mention the fact that she had forgotten to do the stuff. He said, hey, because you are such a great worker, and he's implying that some stuff doesn't always get done as often as it should. And it's not her fault. He doesn't even say it's her fault. He says, you know what? I'm willing to even pay you an extra half hour to get this stuff done because I know you want to do a better job. You want to do a great job. And you know what? You're working so hard. And if you can't get stuff done, obviously I'm not paying you enough. So he's willing to walk with her in the sense of supporting her financially to get her job done. And he says that he came back and his office was immaculate. He said his desk was had a mirror like finish. He said he basically slipped out of his chair because his leather chair was polished. He says it was all because of giving her a reputation to reach for. And then the last example is this bad boy, this kid in school. And I literally did this as a substitute teacher on a regular basis. I'll just tell you my anecdote. So when you substitute teach, not every time, but generally you'll have a little folder with notes from the teacher. And the teachers generally will, and depending on what kids you work with, you work special ed, you get a very thick dossier on some of the kids. But if you're working in a normal class, you will have maybe 1 or 2 or 3 kids listed as problem kids. And then you'll have 1 or 2 or 3 kids listed as helpful kids. And the teacher will give that information to you to try to just give you some tools to deal with. So the kids who are good are the ones you want to encourage and help. They'll help you they'll help you if you're ever confused. And the kids who are naughty, I had one teacher literally say, if these, and this was a huge class, there was like 6 names. If any of these 6 kids give you a hard time, she said, send them to the office immediately. And I was given this job because a little old lady had come to take the job. And I was supposed to teach kindergarten, which is cake. I love teaching kindergarten. It's just, they're adorable. And it's easy. You read books and if you're energetic, everybody thinks you're awesome. But this was a class that was awful. And it was a required band class, and it was awful. But what I did was I walked in there and I gave everybody, and I found which kids were the 6. I gave everybody the job of helping me enter the room with some respect. So I said, hey, you guys, to the whole class, you guys, hey, gather around. You're all goofing off. I'm Mr. Tilley. How many of you guys know me? And most of the class raised their hands. I said, I'm pretty awesome. And they're like, yeah. And I said, so I want you guys to give me a theme song. I want you guys to take a few minutes, work together. And I want to walk in like WWF or WWE. And I want to have a theme song ready when I walk in. So you guys, I'm going to go back in the office and you guys talk to each other. And then I actually told the kids who are problems, I said, you guys are in charge, break into groups. Let's get this done. And then I left. And so I went back into the office and I sat down and I could hear the kids like, man, we got to make something awesome for Mr. Tilley, and they worked together and they talked to each other. And they weren't mean. They weren't rude. They were all very pleasant to one another. They were working together. And then one of the bad kids came up and he says, hey, Mr. Tilley, we're ready for you. And so I flung the door open and then the kids were like, ha, 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 and the drums got in and they were just doing this big old theme song as I walked in and everybody was ecstatic. And, anyway, point being is that we took a very hard situation. I gave the bad kids a reputation to live up to. You guys are leaders, lead. I gave the whole entire class a reputation. You guys, I respect your ability to play instruments. And I respect your ability so much that I want you guys to actually write me a song and I'm going to walk into your song and you guys are going to, it's just great. And it's honoring for them. Anyway, all said and done, we had a great class. I had no problems. No one went home. No one went to the principal's office. I've also had situations where I had a couple of gangbangers, and again, the notes said it. And so I walked up to the one kid quietly, just the two of us, and said, "Hey, man, I know that the other kids respect you, and I said I've had issues with other classes. I'm gonna depend on you to help me keep this class in line, all right?" And the kid's like kind of puffed up, and he goes, kind of looks around. He's like, "If you have any problems, man, you let me know." And I'm like, "Appreciate it, brother." And I walked away. Never had a problem with the kid after that. And I had that kid in my class many times. So anyway, giving somebody a reputation to live up to. Love it. Great, great. It takes some creativity, but man, it's excellent. Number 8, make the fault seem easy to correct. So this is a dancing class. He says that this husband and wife dancing class, and the husband's not good at dancing. The first teacher basically said, "You suck. Just, you're never going to get it. Just, give up on dancing. You just have to sit. This is going to be you. This is going to be you. This is all you got, because you're never going to be able to dance." The second teacher came up and says, "You know what? You got the basics. It's a little old fashioned, but we can work with you." And what he did was she just kept telling him, praising. We're seeing all this stuff overlaps, praising him for the good things, the little improvements he made, and encouraging him to take those next steps, and telling him, "You got this, man. You got this." And making it seem easy. This is very closely related to the idea of trying to have a reputation to reach for. It's in this way that you try to help a person see that they can do it. They are special, and what they want to do, or whatever it is you want them to do in the case of your children, is easy for them because they are so strong, or they are so smart, or they are so whatever. We did this with our kids. That's how our kids learned to seatbelt themselves. I would stand there, and we had a van or a vehicle that was pretty high up, and our kids were toddlers. And we had reinforced this idea of how strong they are and how much they could do on their own, that as soon as our kids were able to crawl, they wanted to do everything on their own. So I would and it takes more time, but it's good. So I would open up the door, they would unbuckle their car seat, and then they would crawl out, and they would have to crawl down the truck or whatever and try to get down. I would stand there with my hand behind them just in case because they fell occasionally, and I'd catch them if they fell. But it gave them opportunity to do it. But we always told them, "You're strong, you're smart, you're beautiful, you can do this." And they did it. And they would regularly capitalize on that, because we tell them, "These are your traits. Live up to your traits. You can do it. Because you're so good at this, it's easy for you." And that's the point. This is a continuation of the last chapter here. He says, this one couple told Dale Carnegie, "You want to play bridge?" And Dale Carnegie goes, "No, I hate bridge. And if you guys don't know what bridge is, don't worry about it. It's just a card game. It's a card game that was very popular 60, 50 years ago. Euchre would be more popular now among the older folks. And euchre is a great game, and I'll fight you if you say it's not. But he says, "I don't want to play bridge." And the guy says, "Hey, man, you're intelligent. You have written books on memory and being able to remember things." He's like, "Come on, man, this is easily up your alley. You can absolutely do this." And so the guy basically, told him how great he was, and then told him that he could, and it would be easy. And Dale Carnegie just fell right into it. He says, "Before I knew it, I was already in the game playing." He says, "And I hated it. I hated bridge prior to that, but this guy talked me into it." This is a very sad story. Dad has a son, 1958. They get into a car accident. The son gets his face cut, his skull and everything gets cut. He's bleeding. He's got a big old nasty scar on his forehead. 2 years later, his parents get divorced. Then the mom takes the kid to Texas. The dad loses custody of the child for some reason. The kid ends up coming to live with dad 10 years later, and he's in special classes. And because he has the scar, everybody thinks he's brain damaged. Everybody just thinks that he can't do things because he's got some kind of mental deficiency. And because of this, and I would say because of that, it's very likely that it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. People were telling him he couldn't do it, and then he believed he couldn't do it. It's nonsense. Anyway, all said and done, this dad and his new wife, the kid said, hey, I want to do radios and TV sets. I want to work on stuff. And he's like, hey, man, you need math for that? You're going to need math. And the kid was struggling with math. He was failing math. The kid's like, well, I really want to do TVs and radios. He's like, well, you know what? Let's get your math scores up. So some flashcards, and the dad would help the kid with flashcards, and they would do the flashes. And then eventually the kid got his grade up to a B. Pretty soon his reading improved and everything else improved. He ended up making an exhibit for the school science fair, got first place. His exhibit was entered into the city of Cincinnati's huge science fair for kids. He got third place at the entire city of Cincinnati. And he says, here was a kid who had flunked 2 grades, who had been told he was brain damaged, who had been called Frankenstein by his classmates. It says, from the last quarter of the 8th grade all the way through high school, he never failed to make honor roll once. He made honor roll the entire time in high school. He was elected to the National Honor Society, and his life was changed forever. Excuse me. His life was changed forever. And he says, it's encouragement that did it. Make the fault seem easy to correct. Encourage the person, tell them be specific about their gifts, about their virtues, and then try to use the virtues, that reputation you've set for them. Try to use that reputation, the virtues that they have inherent to who they are as a person, and help them to strive to reach that bar. And you do that, and then it makes it seem easy. Number 9, I think this is it. This is the last chapter. It's the last chapter. Sad face. Make people glad. Do what you want. 1915. Europe countries in Europe were slaughtering one another at a scale never before dreamed, in all the bloody annals of mankind. He says, William Jennings Bryan, Secretary of State, was a peace advocate, and he wanted to go and try to help bring this peace accord of some sort. But Woodrow Wilson, who was president at the time, appointed another man, Colonel Edward House. And then he also had, when Woodrow Wilson was a pretty awful president for the most, just as far as how he dealt with people. And we see examples of this in the book. So Woodrow Wilson, rather than even talk to the guy and tell Bryan that, he wasn't going to send him, even though, let's be honest, he was probably a better choice. He made House do it. This other guy, House, do it. But House did it in such a way that it didn't make the guy upset. He says, the president thought it would be unwise for anyone to do this officially, and that his going would attract a great deal of attention, and people would wonder why you are there. You're the Secretary of State. If we send you, you're here. Like, the president's here. I don't know where the camera is. The president's here. You're here, man. You're like here. We can't send you. You're too important. Everybody politically will wonder why in the world we're sending this important person. He says, we can't send you, basically. And the guy was not upset, because he basically said the guy is too important to send, which is partly true. If you send the Secretary of State, that's a big deal. He says, Colonel House was following one of the important rules of human relations. Always make the other person happy about doing the thing you suggest. We saw this in the previous chapter with the dentist. The dentist wanted his stuff to get cleaned better. He didn't ridicule, he encouraged, and he offered to pay her more to make sure the job got done well. It's awesome. Make the person happy that they're doing it. Secretary of Treasury, William McAdoo, he said he had a delightful way of putting things. He created the impression that by accepting this great honor, I'd be doing him a favor. I love that idea of helping the person understand if they help you, they're doing you a favor, that they're just doing this huge favor. It's awesome. Excuse me. One of Jeff's chores was to pick up pears. So this is a kid who just wouldn't do his job. And so the dad wanted him to pick up the pears so the lawnmower wouldn't ride over top of them. For our house, it would be sticks. Go pick up the sticks. Your sister or brother or whoever is mowing doesn't have to mow over them, doesn't have to stop mowing. So again, we see that the person is willing to walk with them. Says, Jeff, I'll make a deal with you. For every bushel of a basket of pears, I'll give you $1. But for every pear left in the yard, I'll take away $1. How does that sound? So it's a pretty huge incentive. Now I literally did this with our kids. With our children, I'm not going to tell you how much I give them. I don't care. $5. Well, I'm cheap. So I gave my kids $5 each a week if they did their chores, but they only get $5. But every time they don't do their chores, they lose $1. If you guys do the math, there's 7 days in a week. I'm only giving them $5. So if they don't do their chores, even on a day like Saturday or Sunday, they lose $1. So they might only get paid $4 for working 6. You see the point. And it's just a way for them. It's just a little extra money for them. It's just an incentive. We expect them to do the job anyway. I don't have to pay my kids. I don't charge them rent. I don't charge them for food. I don't have to give my kids allowance. It's by my grace and mercy that they have allowance, and they appreciate it. But it's also an incentive to get their job done. And I'm willing to pay them to do the job they should do anyway. It's just a nice way of helping them to understand they're appreciated in a very little way. So that's what this dad did. Another guy had a lot of invitations to speak, and rather than just blow the person off, which he did often, he says that the guy would actually say, hey, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I'm so sorry I can't do this. And then he would immediately give another person as an option. And then the person asking would have to just go, oh my gosh, I have to go ask this other person then. He said, and just, it made it easier because he didn't give the person another job to do. Excuse me. West Germany, a store clerk was not putting on the proper price tags on the stuff. So the boss Mr. Schmidt calls the young lady to his office and told her that from now on, he says, you are the supervisor. It doesn't tell us if she got a pay raise or not. Very well could have been. You are now the supervisor of price tag posting for the entire store, and you will be responsible for keeping all the shelves properly tagged. This new responsibility and title changed her attitude completely. Again, giving her a title to reach for, knowing full well she can do it. I mean, he didn't give a new title and job to someone arbitrarily. This was a job that needed to be done better. And I'm sure she wasn't the only one struggling to put tags on correctly. He killed 2 birds with 1 stone. It's great. He says Napoleon, and this is really interesting. When he created the Legion of Honor, he distributed 15,000 crosses to his soldiers. He made 18 of his generals marshals of France. So he gave them new titles, marshals of France. And he called his troops the Grand Army. Napoleon was criticized for giving toys to his war-hardened veterans. And Napoleon replied, men are ruled by toys. I love that. I've done this when I've taught classes. If we were doing this in person and I was teaching a class, I would regularly bring in a little thing of stars, gold stars. And if you did the homework, I would give you a gold star. And I'm talking about adults. So when I was in Detroit, I would teach classes and I would go through Bible verses or go through books of the Bible, or I go through other books. And without a doubt, the adults responded just as well to the gold stars and stickers. And I got more creative, Ninja Turtles, stuff like that. Maybe My Little Pony. I don't know. And they would respond just as well as the kids did. I would have adult people with their teenage children in the class with us be like, hey, Pastor Josh, got my homework done. You didn't give me a sticker last week. And I would go check their homework and I'd give them a sticker. Here's an adult who wants a My Little Pony sticker. And it's nothing. It has no value at all. But we really like the admiration and we like the praise. And it's a trophy. It's like, hey, I've accomplished something. And it's great. Titles and authority, says. A woman who had a bunch of kids in her backyard running around, she grabbed one of the kids and she said, "Hey, I want you to be my detective and I want you to figure out who in the world is trespassing on my lawn." And this kid went to crazy extremes. This kid started a fire, got a hot pan or something, put it in the fire till it got red hot. And then when kids would try to walk in her lawn, he threatened to burn the kids with the hot iron. Different times. But she didn't have any problems anymore. So here are the steps here. Be sincere. Do not promise anything that you cannot deliver. Don't say, "I'll give you a pay raise if you do this," and not give a pay raise. Forget about the benefits to yourself and concentrate on the benefits for the other person. That's the point, is try to show your love of the love of Christ by showing your love to others, not looking for what you get out of it. How can you help that person to be better? Know exactly what it is you want the other person to do. Be very specific. There's nothing worse than having a job and not knowing what your job is, or being scolded for not doing something you didn't realize was your job. Be specific about what you expect. Be empathetic. Be empathetic. Ask yourself what it is the other person really wants. Try to understand their thoughts and feelings. Consider the benefits that that person will receive from doing what you suggest. Again, if you are trying to encourage an employee or a child or a spouse or somebody to do something for their own benefit, again, to be a better person, to grow in their faith or grow in some capacity, you should be trying very hard to consider what they will receive, and then also try to help them achieve it. And then also remind them. My wife was trying very hard. She wanted to become a personal trainer. It was going to take a lot of time and effort on her part. And I had just finished my doctorate, so I was done with school. Praise Jesus. And she was just kind of on the fence. Just really, she wanted to, but she just didn't know if she wanted to do it. I encouraged her. I said, "Baby, you can do it without a doubt. You're intelligent. You're beautiful. You're smart. You know the stuff already. This is just going to be the nuts and bolts of it. This is how you're going to explain it." And when she got discouraged, I would just encourage her and remind her, "Babe, once you get done, you'll be able to do this and this and this. It'll be great. You'll be able to make more money. You'll be able to do what you love, and you don't have to keep doing this job you don't want to do." And the same thing happened for me when I was discouraged in 10 years of being in school for my master's and doctorate. In those 10 years, and not including my bachelor's, my wife would regularly encourage me. "Josh, you're almost done. Just one more class. You're almost done to the end of the semester. You're almost done. Once you're done, you'll have your degree and you'll be able to," she was doing the exact same thing for me because I needed it at that time. So try to think of the benefits for the other person. Match those benefits to the other person's wants. Just what we just talked about. "Baby, you want to have this other job? Doing this work is going to get you there. You got this. You got this." When you make your request, put it in the form that will convey to the other person the idea that he or she personally will benefit. We just talked about that. It's exactly what we're talking about. So it is, he says, "In the end, it is naive to believe that you will always get a favorable reaction. No one ever is loved by everybody." Abraham Lincoln, one of the greatest American presidents of all time, was not loved by everybody. He was hated by a lot of people. Anybody you can think of that's the greatest person you can think of has had somebody who didn't like them. If you could be the nice Jesus, for gosh sake. Yeah, Jesus, nicest person on the planet, loved prostitutes and drunkards and tax collectors and the average sinner on the street. Loved everybody. People still hated him. He says, so it'd be naive to believe that doing these things is going to make you have a favorable reaction for everybody. He says, but the experience of most people shows that you are more likely to change attitudes this way than by not using these principles. And if you increase your successes by even 10%, you have become 10% more effective as a leader And I would say just as a Christian, as a person, and that is your benefit. So he says, make the other person happy about doing the thing you suggest. Again, I would say this whole book, at the end of the day, if you apply even one section of these principles to your life, you will, without a doubt, improve your life by at least 10%. And I mean, 10% is insane. Imagine if you were making 10% on your savings account. Right now, your savings account at your bank is making like 0.001%, probably, maybe 0.02, maybe. Imagine if you were making 10%. Your average Roth IRA is between 5 and 8%. If you're doing really well, a little bit higher. If you could increase anything by 10%, it's insane. 10% is huge, even though it sounds like such a small number. But I would be willing to bet that if you applied these principles, you would increase your likability and your ability to help people grow in their faith. I think you would grow in your faith and your understanding of who you are as you apply these principles, and the people in your life apply them. I think it'd be way more than 10%. But at the end of the day, even 10%, it's worth the investment. All right. That's all I have. Any other questions or anything? I don't see any questions in the comments down here. Otherwise, I'm going to pray us out, and that'll be it. So, Father, thank you so much, God, for your grace and your mercy. We praise you, Lord, for this time that we've had with Dale Carnegie. He has such wisdom to share, and we're so happy that we could go back in time and share that wisdom with ourselves now and with each other. We pray, Lord, you'd help us to apply the things that are biblical and help us to learn and grow through those. And we just ask, Lord, that you would guide us, give us wisdom, because we want to be better every day. Just help us to know what the next step is, and we'll take that step in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. God bless you guys. You guys have a great week. And then next week, like I said, we'll be looking at false teachings, fast facts for false teachings. And we will be looking at the introduction next week and just talking about what we're going to be doing moving forward. So anyway, that's next week. God bless you guys, and have a great day.